Good evening and welcome to A Slice of Life. Tonight's topic is something called urban forestry. If you've never heard of that term, welcome to the club. We have tonight with us a Drew Goldsman. He's the Urban Conservation Director at the Nature Conservancy in Connecticut. Drew Goldsman, welcome to A Slice of Life.
Jim, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so before we start talking about urban forestry, tell us how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me here on A Slice of Life. It's a real privilege. I came to the work I'm responsible now at the Nature Conservancy related to urban forestry in a bit of a non-traditional path. I'm an urban planner by training, so I'm not your typical conservationist, and I'm definitely one of a kind of a small cohort at the Nature Conservancy who come with this background. And so I came to this work with a deep commitment to environmentalism and thinking about ways in which we can improve the environment and support our communities and people. When I think about urban conservation, I really come at it from an intersectional approach, thinking about the interplay between the built and the natural environment.
Right.
And for me, cities and density in and of themselves are environmental goods. But we need to also make sure that our residents in cities, those living low carbon lifestyles, living in walkable, transit accessible communities and denser housing using less land, that they have the full access to nature and all of its benefits. And so that's what really led me into the conservation field and thinking about the ways in which our trees are accessible or not to our communities.
Now, planting trees in the city, does it have to be a specific type of tree, or can any old tree grow in the city?
Oh, well, there's a long history of trying different trees, and right now I'd say there's a movement that's most succinctly described as right tree, right place, which may have some limitations, but essentially we're trying to really make sure that we're thinking about what is this tree going to be in 10 years, 25 years, 50 years, 100 years. And so that has to do with many different factors. Of course, we prioritize native trees that are going to have the greatest benefit for wildlife and biodiversity, the birds, bees, and other animals that depend on our trees, both in our large-scale forests as well as right here in our cities and in our denser communities. And so we do prioritize native plantings, but we're also thinking about the reality that in 10, 20, 50, 100 years, our climate may be a bit warmer, and so we need to start thinking about what might be some species that are better suited for a slightly warmer climate. So that's something we're also thinking about. But when it comes down to it, and I'm out there knocking on doors and talking to folks in a community about what tree they may want to have planted in their yard, or what tree they're going to adopt and steward on the sidewalk in front of their house. We'll talk about all this. We'll talk about species. We'll talk about biodiversity. We'll talk about the cooling benefits that it provides. But really, when it comes down to it, it's about what tree are they going to love? What are they going to want to care for? What are they going to be committed to watering for a few years, keeping an eye on, not banging their car door into so much? And really, that's what it comes down to. And that can really kind of take precedent over a lot of the other factors. Or we definitely prioritize that on equal footing as a lot of the other.
So it's almost kind of like an ergonomic approach as well.
It has to be, It has to be something that works for the steward or the adopter or the caretaker, for sure.
Now, I have a question. How many trees in an urban setting makes an urban forest?
Oh, well, you got me with that one. I mean, there's really no objective measure of how we think about how many trees, I would say. When it comes to urban forestry, and often we'll describe it as urban and community forestry. That's kind of how the U.S. Forest Service describes kind of this body of work. It can be anything from your small town with, a main street and street trees there on the sidewalk, all the way up to, here in Connecticut, our Bridgeport, New Haven, Waterbury, dense cities. And that really still takes on many different forms. So it's our street trees, it's our front yards, backyards, private property. It's, of course, our parks, and then our large-scale open spaces. In many of our cities, we do have some really large-scale protected open space that has some, much more traditional forest components that arguably are still part of the urban forest. So I think it's important to describe the trees in our denser, built-up communities as urban forests, but really when it comes down to it, it's all part of the forest. When we're talking about, for the Nature Conservancy and, for example, Devil's Den, our largest open space protected preserve that we have,
Right.
1,700 acres, don't quote me on that we have in Fairfield County in Fairfield County, about 30, 40 miles from Bridgeport. That forest is deeply connected to the trees in Bridgeport. And
Right.
so, it's about the kind of the interplay between the built and the natural environment and the relationship and access that people can have. And for sure, there are very different pressures on the trees in a denser built up environment, but it's all still part of the forest.
Right, right. Now, you mentioned in our email that you work with Yale scholars. What's that all about?
Yeah, this past summer, our program, the Urban Conservation Program, had the privilege of working with the Yale Conservation Scholars Program. This is a program run out of the Yale School of the Environment, in which amazing young people from across the country, so not just Yale students, are paired with organizations doing conservation and environmental work similarly across the country. And it's run out of the Yale School of the Environment, and we had two incredible young folks from Dartmouth University, Dartmouth College, and from Texas A&M who were paired with us to support members of the urban forestry community here across Connecticut. So we were doing work in New London, Bridgeport, and beyond, supporting community-based projects ranging from outreach and door knocking and engaging communities in trees in their backyard, and as well as doing tree inventory support work in Bridgeport. So it took on a real range.
Now, I get the sense that you deal with the public on occasion.
Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, so how does somebody know that they need to contact the Nature Conservancy for some issue they may have in the backyard?
Well, Jim, first off, I'll say they don't, and they probably shouldn't. Or sometimes they do, and honestly, we try to really redirect them to the local partners who are really first and foremost the stewards of their local forests. Right. And so our program at the Nature Conservancy has a real focus on supporting capacity across the state. We have a long history of work in Bridgeport. That's a place where we really got our deepest understanding and continue to support efforts to steward and expand the urban forest in Bridgeport. So that's where we really got our start in this work, building off of a long history of the Nature Conservancy's work and supporting communities in stewarding their natural resources, go on.
I got to tell you, I think stewardship is extremely important to educate people what's going on and what you can do and what they can do in their backyard.
That's right. And so we have a long history of that, right? And the Nature Conservancy here in Connecticut has been active for decades, working with communities on protecting open space and more recently doing dam removal work, as you talked about in an earlier episode. We do resilience building workshops. We do work around coastal resilience and really a range. And all of those are tied to supporting communities to build power to make decisions on their behalf that are improving their community's environment and the people, and kind of at that intersection. And so if I may just say, I think when it comes to our work around urban forestry, we have really taken a approach that, of course, the folks who know their communities best and who have the greatest responsibility over them are the ones who live there, of course.
Right.
And so we've been trying to support building capacity and better understanding Connecticut's really amazing network of urban forestry leaders across the state. And so we are working with partners at the state level and all the way down to neighborhood groups on building capacity so that we can meet the urgent need of expanding or stewarding our existing urban forests and expanding them to meet the critical needs of a warming climate and to keep up with the loss that we're seeing in some of our forests, and to really, and with the focus being on improving human health outcomes, by addressing the urban heat island effect, which is this effect where, we have built up, we have asphalt, we have roofs where the solar energy gets absorbed, and we get these pockets of extreme heat. When we're already having heat waves, we get 5 degrees plus increases in our urban areas.
Now, you mentioned heat island, and this doesn't compare to the urban, my story doesn't compare to the urban level, but I've lived in suburbia my whole life and now currently in Old Saybrook, and I have basically no big trees in my front yard. And in the back half of my backyard is full of trees. And so when I'm walking around cutting the grass in bright sunshine, August, September, it's 90 degrees, it's really hot. And then if I step into what I call the shady quadrant, there is a dramatic temperature change. And so you could see how, I'm a bird watcher, so a bird is struggling at the bird bath out in bright sunshine, 90, 95 degrees, but they tend to hang out in the shadiness where it's about 10, maybe 15 degrees cooler.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jim, it's not rocket science when it comes down to it. I think there's something deeply, almost evolutionary about the way that, I mean, definitely our human relationship to trees in general is it goes pretty deep. There's a spiritual connection. There's a real, I think, just kind of biophysical connection that we have to trees. And that shading is just, the cooling that it provides is not just shade, though. I will say one of its the greatest kind of tools that trees, or kind of the power that trees bring, that when it comes to cooling, is a phenomenon called evapotranspiration. So it's essentially the conversion of water to water vapor is part of what leads the tree to provide such cooling effects in our communities. And when we're out there, again, doing door knocking, talking to folks in communities about trees, there's a lot of things in cities in particular that people may not be too keen on having a tree planted in front of their house. And we know that there's been a long history of neglect of our trees in general in our forests, and particularly in our urban forests, when it comes to sidewalks heaving and limbs coming down and leaf litter not being cleaned up. And so there are a lot of reasons why people are pretty wary and concerned about having new trees planted, and that's something that we really want to honor and respect and recognize. And but when we do talk to folks in a really robust way about trees and all the things that they kind of can do, often what we hear about is beauty. People love trees for the beauty, and I think that is just a deep connection we have, especially flowering trees. And then the cooling effects. Where can my kids go when it's a hot summer day and it's always under the tree and they want some more shade?
Well, what I learned, I just recently completed my Master Gardener program at UConn. And what we learned is each leaf has these pores called stomata, and they are actually transpiring water out of the tree.
There you go.
And so you can imagine a big tree with millions of stomata on their leaves is dumping a lot of water into the air.
Yeah, that's that evapotranspiration.
There you go, That's amazing.
And if I may say, you speak to kind of you asked earlier about what trees are we prioritizing, how we think about the species mix and so on. And definitely, shade trees are kind of the crown jewel here when it comes to the impacts that they have. And for sure, our mature trees, we need to do an incredible amount to protect the existing canopy, right? 100-year-old, mature, healthy oak tree is doing a heck of a lot more from every aspect than that newly planted 2-inch caliper tree that we're planting.
Talking about newly planted trees, we actually have some photos of the Nature Conservancy planting some newly planted trees.
Perfect.
Let's go to that. What's going on there?
Well, this is actually, I will say, this is not a newly planted tree. This is a beautiful, I don't recall what this was, but this is one of our Yale conservation scholars.
Well, I thought that was you.
No, that's not. That's Corey, and he was out in Bridgeport. This is in Seaside Park in Bridgeport. We were doing some work with the organization, an incredible group called Groundwork Bridgeport, who does a lot in the city. And one of the big projects that they're working on right now is to inventory the city's street trees and park trees,
that's
so that
important.
they can have a better understanding of what is the species mix, what's the age. And so right here they're doing they're measuring the DBH, the diameter at breast height, which is one of the key measures of a tree's size and age.
Okay. Next, please.
Here we go.
Oh, here's a group. These are presumably our volunteers and
Yeah,
landowners.
this is a mix. This is a group of our staff and volunteers, and you can see on the, I guess I'm not sure which side, the left side of the screen, there's a couple here, and this is in their backyard in Groton.
yeah.
So this is in the city of Groton. We're working on a project to assess and better understand the stormwater system in the Five Corners neighborhood in Groton.
Now, I tried to zoom in on my computer on this photo, and it looks like it might be an oak tree.
You know, I
you
can't
know?
recall. We did plant a good number of pin oaks. We did a number, there was a real mix of trees that we did.
Excellent,
Yeah.
very good.
Pin oaks are often one that are a real powerhouse. I mean, as you know, in general, oaks
Right.
are just such a powerhouse. And pin oaks are kind of they have a bit of a tighter growth pattern that is pretty well suited for some of our backyard plantings.
Well, also what I learned in the Master Gardener program is that oak trees are hosts for hundreds of caterpillars, butterflies, moths, that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Just hundreds
It's
of them.
really incredible.
It is. Oh, now,
And so this is now this is another one of our conservation scholars. This is back in Bridgeport. This is Skylar Nix. And he's using a clinometer, which is a fancy word for a really incredible tool that allows you to estimate at a pretty high level of accuracy the height of the tree. So we get that DBH, that measure of diameter.
Right.
We get the height of the tree. So those are two key measures of the size, age, and health of the tree.
now, I remember in my youth, you would measure the shadow and get it at a 1-for-1 kind of angle of the sun. But inclinometer seems a lot more accurate.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's essentially just kind of formalizing that approach. That's right.
All right, next one, please. Okay.
So here we are back in Groton. This was another planting that we were doing in a backyard.
Yep.
And in Groton, this is all connected to this broader project of assessing stormwater management needs in the Five Corners neighborhood. And so we take what we describe as our planting while planning approach. You know, we often in our communities, we're doing a lot of planning, right? There's a lot of conversations about what are we doing, what do we need to do for the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Yep.
And that's really critically important. We need to do that. We need to have deep community engagement to do that. But along the way, we're finding that by planting trees in our backyards, in communities, is a really powerful way to demonstrate, like, let's make some impact here and now today.
Right.
And engage folks in a meaningful way. And so that's an approach we're taking in Groton. As we do long-term planning related to the stormwater system, we're engaging folks and planting trees on the street and in parks and backyards, which also has, some pretty significant impacts on managing stormwater. So it's a win-win-win for our perspective.
Next photo, please.
Here's
a nice
another one.
tall
Yep.
sapling, if you will.
Yeah, and we generally use, and this is another Groton planting here. We, kind of generally best practice in the field is to use balled and burlap. So that's what you can see here. You can see that root ball there is wrapped in burlap.
Yep.
And these are generally 2-inch calipers, or 2-inch diameter trees, and you can see they're pretty sizable. So when we get some of these out on the street or in backyards, they make a really immediate impact on the landscape. It's really exciting.
Okay, next, please.
And here you go. You get a better view of that
Yeah,
B&B.
That seems a little bigger than 2 inches across.
Well, it's got some wrapping around it, and sometimes they are, and it can be a little bit of a beast. And there are different approaches. There are bare root, where they've shaken off the soil. There are potted trees. But in terms of particularly street trees, though this is a backyard, it's a challenging environment. And so the bigger, the better, that allows that tree to really get a leg up, literally get above, the very natural level of a kid who wants to hang on a branch, but is not yet strong enough to do so. And I didn't mention earlier, one of the critical measures that we use to understand a community's forest or its urban forest is the percentage of canopy cover. And so we fly planes over, we use satellite imagery to understand the cover of canopy in a community. And that's literally just looking at the crowns of trees and what percentage of the community is covered by those crowns. And so the real focus of the Nature Conservancy are in our communities that have the critically low canopy cover, which would be in the below 10% range. In our region, in cities in our region, we like to a general goal is in the 35 to 40% canopy cover.
Right.
Many of our neighborhoods and communities are, even in our cities, are 40, 50, 60% cover.
Oh, wow.
The state's urban forest cover is often characterized as upwards of 60%. First or second in the country.
Yeah.
But that's often because, as you described, we have a pretty suburbanized state, and a lot of those suburban communities, which are important parts of our urban forest, really skew that on to a higher level.
Right,
and so
right.
we do want to make sure we're focusing on those neighborhoods in all of our big cities and even many of our smaller cities that are down in the single digits of canopy cover.
We have a lady in Old Saybrook who's in charge of the Save Our Shade organization, and she's trying to do much the same thing.
That's right.
But you know, you drive down the road, and it's not at all uncommon to see somebody cutting down what you would have assumed was a perfectly or almost perfectly healthy tree.
Yeah.
And you know, they don't like the leaves, or they don't like it ruins their lawn or something. And
yeah, well, first off, I'll say, I mean, that effort that your friend is working on there is one of many incredible examples of community-based efforts to both protect our existing canopy and expand it. So there's such incredible work, and that's one of our key efforts with our Urban Forest Network project, is to support and build greater connectivity of these efforts across the state. But I will say, there's some, again, natural tensions. Our utilities in Connecticut do not do well after a big storm when, they are being held accountable for a week-long power outage or whatever it might be. And so there were some real tensions. For example, we have a lot of trees planted, beautiful, mature, 125-year-old trees that were planted prior to having overhead power lines on the roadways. And so it's a real natural tension, especially when the utilities get their feet are to the fire after a big storm, and so they might swing really hard the other direction. It's about liability and risk management for them.
I think
we need to find that balance there.
That started to occur after that October snowstorm, and a lot of trees got cut.
Yeah, and so again, in the same way that we need to understand why a resident may be a little concerned and need some kind of care when it comes to understanding their relationship to why they may not immediately want a tree planted on their block. It's similarly with utilities. I think there's a lot that we have to acknowledge, that there's, and municipalities, that there's a concern around risk, and we need to manage and steward our trees better so that we don't get to a place where we've got these 100-year-old trees that are seen as high risk. And to your point, we also need to push back on people who are just a little too cut crazy, when it comes to some of our trees. They're doing a lot of work, particularly those mature trees.
Let's talk about your website. I went to tnc.org/CT, and it seems to me that the Nature Conservancy is doing a lot of stuff.
We do.
Do you need volunteers?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of different projects happening across the state. We've got an incredible one not too far from here, working in Rocky Neck State Park to assess the ecosystem kind of challenges and the tidal system there that's really been facing some constraints over the years. And we're trying to more deeply engage residents and users of Rocky Neck. So that's one area definitely we're looking to engage folks. We have volunteer efforts and projects on plover management work that we're doing across the shoreline. We do plantings both in Bridgeport. We're doing some work in Waterbury and New London. So there's a lot of ways to get involved in our work that we're deeply eager to hear from folks about ways in which they want to participate.
Okay, deeply eager.
Yeah,
deeply eager is a good phrase right there. So if you have some spare time and you're interested in doing Nature Conservancy work, there you go, nature.org/CT. They will readily take your help.
That's right.
Isn't that true?
That's right, Jim. Absolutely. We've got a lot of need. And I should just also, I'm remiss to mention, what we are best known for are the incredible network of preserves that we have across the state.
Yes.
So we own and manage about 15,000 acres of land and have another 15,000 acres under conservation easement that we manage. And so that's over 60 plus preserves. And we have work days and all sorts of stewardship opportunities for folks to get engaged in.
And would you say that there's training for volunteers?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just here's a shovel and
No,
go
no,
dig.
no. We have to make sure that people know what they're doing. We bring a lot of care to that
Right,
for
right,
sure.
right.
We can't be having people out there willy-nilly. We got a lot of sensitive, landscapes that we're managing. So yeah, please, that's another area. And those are dispersed, across the state. Definitely many here in the kind of Connecticut Rivermouth area in particular.
Right. So what I have learned, my wife and I garden, and she's not very particular in what she does when she weeds. And so I've kind of like said, you can't weed anymore because she'll pull out weeds and the good plants and
Yeah.
just, she likes to create a clean slate. And I said, you really shouldn't be weeding anymore.
Yeah, it's a tough balance, right?
Yeah.
You got to be able to manage what you have. And,
Right, right.
And hey, there are a lot of things that we don't want growing in our gardens. That's for sure. I mean,
absolutely,
if she's weeding mugwort and knotweed, I got no issues with that.
We got lots of mugwort.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
milkweed, we should leave some milkweed. I
Yeah.
mean, so it's a balance.
Right,
and you need to
right.
have a landscape that works for you and your home. But the more that we can leave, I'd say less about weeding your little flower garden and more can you leave an extra half acre of a big backyard unmowed for
Right,
the spring
yeah.
in particular. Like that's where it's going to really have some impact.
All right. So tonight's guest was Drew Goldsman. He is the Urban Conservation Director at the Nature Conservancy in Connecticut. And the Nature Conservancy does a lot of work. And Drew is in charge of the urban aspect of it. And I'm so happy that you came here today
Jim, it's been my pleasure.
to kind of shed some light on what an urban forester does.
You got it. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Oh, I was delighted to have you, yeah.
Appreciate it.
All right, so that's it for urban forestry. And once again, Drew Goldsman, thank you so much for coming, and I appreciate what you do.
It's been my pleasure.
All right. Thank you, and have a good day.